There's a lot going on in this movie.
It was like I was watching it for the first time.
I like this movie.
It has a special place in my heart.
Very close to my heart.
This was a good one.
I want to like this movie.
What? Seriously?
I loved it.
Very flat, kind of boring.
This movie blows me away. This movie turns me on.
Terrible. It is terrible. All these keys everywhere. Influences, baby.
Huge fan.
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Hello out there in podcast and YouTube land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys, where we talk about key influences of horror movies and science fiction films and those elements that often lift them up above, but sometimes just separate them from the average genre fare. Are you new to us? Well, we would like to welcome you. David and I have been doing this podcast for several years now. However, our extensive and somewhat insane amount of movie knowledge extends decades and probably further back than we would care to admit. We have been talking movies for a very long time together, and now we share it with the masses. Those of you that are coming back already know this and hopefully see something or hear something that you like.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And I am here with my good friend and co-host, David Horton. David, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. We like to start, as always, with a little brief, what have you been doing in your genre week? Mine was semi-genre, but more fantasy. I think last time we recorded, I spoke that I finished Silo, which is an Apple TV original science fiction series in its second season now. And I just finished the second season of House of the Dragon. Our House of Dragons. And I know you're not a Game of Thrones fan and haven't really watched it.
Well, it's not that I'm not a fan. I've just never seen it.
I think this would be a really good primer for you and something that'd be really cool to show you what Game of Thrones is like without investing in 7 years when the last season sucks so bad that you don't even want to watch it anymore. It's a prequel to the story that takes place in Game of Thrones. We're still written by George R.R. Martin, but it's dealing with the Targaryens, which is a family that are the dragon riders of the world at the time. So great special effects with dragons, great storytelling, still the Game of Thrones stuff of political intrigue and factions fighting against each other and backstabbing and trying to control the whole continent. Watched the first season and liked it, but thought, I don't really know these characters because I'm so used to the 7 years of Game of Thrones, and now suddenly we're 150 years in the past with other people and other things are different and all of that. But by season 2, they've figured out a way to really make them compelling and interesting and ramped up the intrigue a lot, because you got to really like the whole court battles and politics that go on. That's kind of the backbone of Game of Thrones. So literally what the title means is, how do you play the Game of Thrones? And so, but it's really good. And I think you would probably like it. And I think you would like a lot of the characters in it, a lot of the effects in it, and the storytelling, the plotting is really strong. So,
well, whenever we decide to drop a streaming service, I'm sure we'll pick up Max for a while. So one of these days I'll be indulging in all of that stuff, I imagine.
Yes. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I went a little darker, I think, than you did. And sorry, the sun's coming in my window and it's blinding me. I watched a little ditty called Longlegs.
Oh, wow. Okay. I'm very curious because I have not seen it, but I've heard things.
Well, I might switch it out for a movie on next season's list.
Really? Okay.
I was considering it. It came out, of course, last year. I'm not sure if it's the best serial killer movie to come along since Silence of the Lambs, but it is definitely disturbing and memorable.
Okay.
The thing that makes it unique is that there's a legitimate supernatural element to the story, which you don't have in most serial killer movies.
Of
So
course not.
that's
No.
really kind of cool. Also, think Satanic Panic of the 70s, only it's set in the 90s, like Silence of the Lambs.
Okay.
So it is set 30 years ago, but it's got a satanic thing going on.
Okay.
It was written and directed by Osgood Perkins. Of course, he's son of Tony Perkins, Mr. Norman Bates himself in Psycho.
Okay.
When you hear modern horror directors, Osgood's name always comes up, particularly because of a movie he did called The Blackcoat's Daughter. I have seen that, and I may have not been in a good mood when I saw it. I don't know. I now want to rewatch it because of this film. He also recently did Stephen King's The Monkey. That's like in theaters right now as we're recording this. So he is definitely making a name for himself. But if I had to equate him, I would equate him closer to Ty West than I would Robert Eggers or Mike Flanagan or Ari Aster. So I think he's on the lower spectrum of popular horror directors, but he's still good. So, and he may still do something that blows me away. The Monkey may blow me away. I don't know. The cast is excellent.
Is it the It Follows girl? Is she in that?
It is. Micah Monroe is the lead. You will barely even recognize her. She is a woman now, and she lost like the baby fat or whatever, or she either just lost some weight, but like her face looks different to me now. It looks older and thinner.
Okay.
And she has brown hair instead of blonde hair, so that's different. And she wears it in a ponytail. It's very Jodie Foster trying to play down her prettiness. And Nicolas Cage is not recognizable at all. he will freak you out. And it also stars someone else who I am beginning to really treasure because I see him in everything, and it's Blair Underwood. He plays the Crawford-like character in this.
Okay.
Blair Underwood, I remember originally from way back in the 80s on LA Law. Young, attractive black man. But he has been on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He was the love interest forever on that show, The New Adventures of Old Christine. And both of those, I've been watching them lately on streaming platforms. And anyway, Blair Underwood's showing up in everything I watch now, including this movie. It also stars Alicia Witt, who I did not know, but I think she's in something you watch. Is it?
Okay.
It may have been Game of Thrones or For All Mankind. I'm sorry, I did not put it in my notes. I thought I did. But she turns in a really noteworthy performance. So those are the four main characters. A synopsis is FBI agent Lee Harker is assigned to an unsolved serial killer case that takes an unexpected turn, revealing evidence of the occult. Harker discovers a personal connection to the killer and must stop him before he strikes again. It scores 86 on Rotten Tomatoes. I would bump that up to a 90, and that's with over 300 reviews. There are a couple of logic things that I question that I would like to hopefully clear up with a second viewing, but the mood and the suspense and the dread he creates with this movie is palpable.
Okay.
And that's all done with direction and lighting and camera placement and stuff. So yeah, I think you would enjoy it, and that's why I'm like, ooh, should I put it on next season's list before we finalize it? So
Great.
Anyway, yeah. And we've not done an Oz Perkins film, so that's what I did.
That's pretty cool.
No segue though.
You watched a supernatural serial killer.
This movie that we're talking about has a creature with long legs. His name is Gort.
Yeah. His name is Gort. We are okay. Let me change my filter since we're going back to the 50s. And
I think you're already there.
Well, no, I need to change my
Oh,
the
I see what
filter
you're
filter.
saying.
So I do this and go to like a noir feel to us. I, of course, am excited about today's episode. This is a Redux episode, so we have done this before. I think the first season we did this particular movie, and I'm sure due to my prodding and suggestion, but we have now decided to do some reduxes each year of our first two seasons, which were not on the YouTubes. So you YouTubers out there, this is for you guys, and we hope you like it and hope I can remember everything I said about the first one, just because those of you who have been fans of the show and listening to us and everything else know this is my favorite science fiction movie of all time. It is. I could watch it over and over and over again on repeat. I have seen it over and over on repeat dozens and dozens of times. It's called The Day the Earth Stood Still. It came out in 1951. To me, it is a science fiction classic of all the good things that are cool about science fiction cinema, from robots to spaceships to threats to social commentary all the way through it. Some really suspenseful scenes and also some really cool effects scenes. So just everything that you could possibly want in a science fiction film is in this. And it is brilliant and awesome and great. And I could go on, but first probably should be a synopsis, I guess. Let me do a brief synopsis. So
Sure.
the movie starts with an object coming into Earth's atmosphere. It's obviously a UFO. We don't know. It's just this glowing object. All of the citizens of the world are alerted to it through media, and it slowly moves around the planet and ends up landing in Washington, D.C., on the mall in Washington, D.C. Of course, as we would with any foreign invader that we don't know what it is, it's surrounded by the military. A being comes out of it. He offers something, or actually pulls something from his coat, and is immediately shot by one of the young soldiers, who is nervous and scared. Doesn't kill the alien, but it injures him and he falls down. And when they are distracted by going to his body, they look up and there is a towering 8-foot robot standing there, who proceeds to use some kind of beam from his helmet and destroys a lot of their military equipment. The alien speaks to him in some foreign language we don't understand, and the robot calms down. He is taken to a hospital,
Calm
and
down. Calm down, Gort.
yeah, just chill, buddy, chill. And that's where we learned that he does speak English. His name is Klaatu. He has come here in seeking, and he insists on speaking to all the leaders of the world at the same time. He quickly learns that that is virtually impossible in 1951 Earth, because of all of the Cold War that exists and all of the antipathy that exists between all the countries. And so instead of getting upset about it, he decides he's going to spend some time here and study Earth a little bit more. He and his race have obviously been studying Earth for a few generations, but not practically. So he escapes from the hospital with little or no trouble, infiltrates the public, ends up befriending a single mother, her son, and her fiance slash boyfriend at a boarding house, and learns a lot about life in America in 1951. He ends up, by the end of it, being friends with a scientist who is ironically having a group of scientists who visit Washington, D.C., and they're from all over the world. So he gets his format to give his message out to the entire planet. In the meantime, he's actually shot, killed, brought back to life,
Shot a
stops
second time.
Yeah, shot all power, stops all power on the planet for half an hour, and delivers his message at the end, which is basically, as long as you little piddly ass earthlings were messing around with your own world and blowing each other up and creating nuclear weapons and all that, that's fine. You can do all that you want. But now you're interested in space, and you're talking about taking all of that aggression and all of that stuff into space, and that we can't allow. So just like we showed you with Gort, he could easily destroy this entire planet if he wanted to. If you don't calm your aggressions down before you go into space, then you, as a matter of fact, I even wrote it down. Hold on, it's in my notes. Your choice is simple. Join us and live in peace, or pursue your present course and face obliteration. We shall be awaiting your answer. And he leaves and flies off, and that's the end. I love that ending, and it's chilling, and it's cool, and it's neat, and that's a synopsis.
And it's relevant today.
And is still relevant now. Unless you can stop fighting amongst yourselves, you're not really worthy to join our group and to mature as denizens of the universe. Do you remember the first time you ever saw this movie?
I'm pretty sure the first time I saw this, ironically enough, was obviously with you on videotape, but I think it may have been at your house again, which is weird because I saw Andromeda Strain at your house for sure, and that was also a Robert Wise movie. So if it wasn't at your house, we watched it at mine, but I watched it with you on videotape for sure because I never saw it on TV.
I cannot say that Robert Wise is not one of my favorite directors of science fiction, because my two big go-tos in science fiction, my favorite one, which is Day There Stood Still, and the one that I think is definitive science fiction, Andromeda Strain, he directed.
Right.
So he definitely knows science fiction.
Well, and I told you when we covered Andromeda Strain in an earlier Redux, it's funny that both of your Reduxes this season were Robert Wise films, that he's an American treasure. He got started editing for Orson Welles. He started directing for Val Lewton at RKO. He went on to do I Want to Live, Run Silent, Run Deep, West Side Story, The Sound of Music, The Haunting, Star Trek, The Motion Picture, and this, and The Andromeda Strain. He is incredible. You know you're in good hands if it's a Robert Wise film, unless the script's bad, like Star Trek.
Like Star Trek, the motion picture. I was just about to say, yes.
Yeah, and that was also when he was starting to go downhill, or he was just getting older, and he didn't do many films after that, I don't think. So,
no, not after that.
He was attracted to this project because of its overt anti-military stance and because he believed in UFOs. I found that interesting. So that's another reason why I guess he did so many science fiction films.
I saw this movie originally, Shock Theater, I think, or one of the afternoon movies or something like that, and just immediately fell in love with it. And of course, if you're growing up in the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, you're hearing Klaatu Barada Nikto, you're hearing the term Gort, you're seeing Gort the robot compared to Robbie the robot or the robot from Lost in Space. So there's a lot of sci-fi cultism around this movie. Even if people haven't seen it, they know some of the references from it. So it was really impactful for me. That the whole message and the thematic of it has always meant a lot to me and resonated to me. And so that's why it became one of my favorites, and that's why I've owned it in every media I can find it in, and have rewatched it literally dozens and dozens of times.
Like me and Night of the Living Dead. Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
I after viewing this again recently, I would venture to say that this is my third most favorite science fiction film.
Oh, that's great.
Well, I'm going to gravitate to sci-fi horror, so I can't put it above The Thing or Alien. But as far as, it's an easy third, because like you said, it's got all the elements that make a great science fiction film. It really does.
Yeah.
Gort is not a monster, but he's still scary. So
very well, the way he's filmed, and that's all Robert Wise, because it's kind of a goofy looking design and suit, but Robert Wise
it doesn't look
films
metal. It looks like it bends. Yeah.
Yeah. But he films it very and has a couple of really cool attacks with him, and the way he's underlit all the time.
And the effects are great. They stand up. They're small, but they're great.
Yeah. The screenplay was written by Edward North. It was actually based on a short story that came out in 1940 by Harry Bates called Farewell to the Master. And I've read it, and it's not the same story, but it's the same story. Klaatu's still in there and Gort's still in there, but there's a lot of differences of it. This is much more Cold War, much more humanistic. And I'm not sure if I've got it in my notes under the writer. I'm not sure if it's going to end up by the end of you saying it's on the 2001 movies or 1001 movies, but it was selected for preservation by the National Film Registry for culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant. So yeah, should have been.
Yeah, most of our early films were on the 1001 list because we were picking heavy duty ones back then. That's why we're redoing some of them now that were on videotape.
Yeah.
I saw that about Bates, and I was wondering if you had read it. It said it was originally published in Astounding Science Fiction magazine.
Yeah.
And I thought that was kind of cool. I'm sure you got it in some kind of omnibus or something, probably.
I did. Collection. Yep.
Yeah, and I've got that the only resemblance to the story is the giant robot. The man's name was Klaatu instead of Klaatu, and the robot was named Nut or Gnut, Gnut, not Gort.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But those are the only similarities.
There's a lot of differences. Like in the very beginning, Klaatu is actually killed. He's actually killed when they attack him at the beginning.
Oh, so there was a character named Klaatu?
Yeah.
They liked his name better for the movie. Yeah. Another thing about this movie, I think that is super strong and makes this movie is Bernard Herrmann's music. I think the music in this movie is awesome.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So fantastic. Yes. Well, that's one of my standouts in this, that and the direction. And there's so much.
Well, and we know that Bernard Herrmann has done other great films like Psycho and It's Alive. So. Sorry, I had to get that in there. I don't know how Bernard Herrmann can do movies like this and Psycho and then do a movie like It's Alive. That just blows my mind.
What about scenes? Are there scenes that stand out to you?
A lot. The whole landing on the mall. I used to live in D.C. and I was a little confused because I don't remember baseball diamonds on the mall. So that must have been a 1950s thing. That was kind of odd to me, but that's not why it's a good scene. I just like the way the flying saucer comes in and lands right there in front of the Washington Monument. With the first scene with Gort, obviously, because it's menacing. And you think he's going to kill people when all he really does is make their weapons disappear.
Yeah, but those weapons meaning not just guns, but howitzers and tanks, too. He can melt.
I love the scene where the boy sneaks out and follows him to the spaceship, which is really cool. You're like, don't do that. But it's the 50s, kid. You're okay. Nothing's going to happen to a kid in the 50s.
I like for me, it's every scene, but definitely all the ones you've mentioned, plus the fact that when he goes to meet Professor Barnard and breaks into his study and changes the blackboard formula for him, and then tells the secretary, don't erase that, he'll want to see that, sort of thing. Michael Rennie is brilliant in this movie. I just love everything he does. And of course the ending of this film is known for that ending. He comes out and says very little, but what he says is hugely impactful. For me, it's not necessarily a scene, but it's something I love about it. It's the choices that the writer and director made in things like in the very first scene in the hospital when he's talking to the ambassador from the White House. He says, "That's how we learned your languages." He doesn't say language. He says languages.
Yeah, he's globally focused. He's not. He only landed in the United States. He is globally focused. He doesn't. He sees it as an interplanetary mission, not a United States mission.
Yes, my mission here is not to solve your petty squabbles. That's another line I have in my notes. The doctor says their medicine is obviously that much more advanced than ours because Klaatu is shot, but ends up being totally healed within like a day. So it's that kind of thing.
Well, and Gort brings him back to life after he dies.
Correct. And that became a little bit of a trivia sticking point for the studio. But Klaatu has a line where they ask him, what can you do? And he goes, well, violent action, of course, since that seems to be the only action you understand.
This movie obviously has a message, and I don't want to get on a soapbox and I don't want to digress too long because it's going to run long anyway. But I just feel like not enough people read books these days. And certainly not enough people watch good movies these days. And I think that one of the reasons why art is so important is that we learn from it. And I can't tell you how many people in Washington right now need to watch this fucking movie because this movie is still relevant today. It is very relevant today.
Extraordinarily. And I also don't think, by the same token of reading, I don't think enough Americans travel outside the United States.
I agree with that too.
I don't think enough of them see other countries and the conditions and realize the global interconnectivity that we have. And they want to be such isolationists and such nationalists. And that's a huge...
Yeah, we are citizens of Earth, not citizens of just the United States. We are all related, whether people like it or not. It's just sad.
Yeah, it is. And it's sad that it was recognized in 1940. It was made this movie in 1951. They did the remake of it, which I'll talk about later on and be very upset about.
I almost watched it, but I didn't.
I took one for the team, and I did. And it's still relevant today. Star Trek talked about it too.
Oh yeah,
there's several episodes of Star Trek. Speaking of keys and stuff, the original series that are about war and aggression and the fact that you've got to control yourself if you want to live in a global, quote, international, intergalactic environment.
Yeah, you don't go flipping tables like housewives.
Right, or screaming at people or anything else.
No.
And again, it's another quote I have in my notes where in that last speech, one of the things Klaatu says is, goes, this does not mean giving up any freedom, except, of course, the freedom to act irresponsibly. And you go, yes, there you go.
Yeah. And what do they do when he first lands? They shoot him. It's so typical. And he does pull something out, but it doesn't really look like a weapon. It looks like a toy almost. And they shoot him.
Springs open is the thing. It triggers. And that's why the kid just reflexively pulled his revolver and shot him.
And it was a gift for the president that was going to help him do something. I can't remember what it was.
Speak to the other planets.
Yeah, like be a translator.
Yeah. So that was, and it would have been great, but you just blew it, guys. So just like you would.
Did you want to talk about any other scenes before I move on to the cast? I've got a good bit on the cast.
Again, there's so many. The way he does the whole, they're in the car, the suspense of he knows he's being chased. He's in the car with her. Should something happen to me, I need you to do this. And that's where we get Klaatu Barada Nikto. And what it basically translates is protect her, go get my body, bring me back to life. That is such a cool sequence, that whole thing, from the way it shows his jail cell and suddenly the whole wall starts to glow and then melt and Gort is standing there. It's just cool and just, yeah. It's just so cool. Oh, by the way, there'll be spoilers in this, guys, if we didn't say that before.
Well, and I love that Patricia Neal doesn't say it right away, so because she's scared, and there's suspense there as well. Yeah.
He has to say it like 4 times before he...
Yeah. Michael Rennie is obviously the lead in this. He's a British actor, started as a used car salesman and factory manager, then got his first gig as a stand-in for Robert Young in Secret Agent, directed by Alfred Hitchcock in 1936.
Yeah.
That's wild that his first movie was an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why he was cast, you've already mentioned, I think, or at least implied, is that he was unknown to American audiences. Daryl Zanuck showed the script to Spencer Tracy, and Tracy wanted to play the role, but Julian Blaustein objected, saying that the audience would have numerous expectations about the character upon seeing a familiar face.
Yep.
It was first offered to Claude Rains, another genre actor that we're well familiar with. He wanted to accept it but had to decline because of a prior commitment on Broadway. And decades later, Robert Wise remarked, "Fortunately, we didn't get him." Because I don't think he wanted Claude Rains to be in that part. I mentioned this the first time we recorded this. I remember that little anecdote. Patricia Neal plays Helen Benson. We know her fairly well because we grew up doing theater in Tennessee, and she is from Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
She
She also married Roald Dahl. So,
she did. She married Roald Dahl, a very well-known author that wrote Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, James and the Giant Peach, as well as many little tales of the unexpected. She won the Tennessee State Award for dramatic reading while she was in high school. She apprenticed at the Barter Theater in Abington, which I've seen shows there with you. Mm-hmm. And when she was 16 years old, she did that when she was 16 years old. She met Roald Dahl in 1953, and they had 5 children and 30 years of marriage. Anne Baxter was originally cast. I'm not sure why she had to drop out.
I don't know that either.
And Anne Baxter is All About Eve, right? I think she was in All About Eve with Bette Davis. Hugh Marlowe plays Tom Stevens. That's Helen Benson's boyfriend. He was in three Best Picture nominees, 12 O'Clock High, All About Eve, speaking of which, and Elmer Gantry. And All About Eve, of course, won in 1950. He is often confused by me, but also the American public, with Richard Carlson. Richard Carlson, we last saw, I believe, in Creature from the Black Lagoon. We may have seen him in something else as well, because he was in several, 50s sci-fi movies.
Yeah, and they are similar.
They are very similar and easily confused. Sam Jaffe played Professor Jacob Barnhart. This was his last Hollywood film, and he did not appear for another 7 years because he was blacklisted. I'm sure you have that in your notes.
Yep.
In 1958, John Huston wanted him for his very original The Barbarian and the Geisha, which is also known as John Wayne's worst movie. And director William Wyler came forward later to cast him as Simonides in the blockbuster Ben-Hur. But until that 7-year period between this and Barbarian and the Geisha, he didn't work because he was blacklisted for being communist, I guess. I don't know the details, but I'm sure that's what was going on in the 50s. So,
well, and he readily admitted it. He did support the Communist Party, not in an overthrow of America. He just thought that communism would be a better governmental state.
Billy Gray plays Bobby Benson, the little boy in the film. He is best known for growing up a little bit, 3 years later, and playing Bud on Father Knows Best. Very recognizable actor. He is 87 and still alive. I guess he's the only person alive from this film that I can think of anyway.
Oh, yeah.
He is just 7 years younger than Patricia Neal, who played his mother. Can that be? Was Patricia Neal really that young in the movie? I guess she was.
I guess, yeah.
So, yeah, she would have been 18, maybe he was 11 or something, probably. Yeah, wow, that's wild. She's very pretty in this movie. And when I watched it, she struck me more than anything this time in viewing it. I was like, she is really good. I want to see more of her. So I've been looking for stuff that she's in. Frances Bavier is in this. She plays Mrs. Barley. Most people will remember her from as playing Aunt Bee on the Andy Griffith Show.
Andy?
This was her first movie. I didn't realize she was more of a stage actress, and then, of course, she went to television. Another thing I didn't know is that she was often remembered as being difficult and temperamental. Did you know this?
I did not know that. Really?
I have quotes. Andy Griffith himself said, there was something about me she didn't like. And Ron Howard said she didn't like kids. So she didn't like Opie or Andy, even though she was their Aunt Bee.
Okay.
I found that very funny. And then lastly, the other big figure in the movie, of course, is Locke Martin, who plays Gort, the robot. He doesn't really have any lines, but they needed someone that was very tall. And he was discovered as Grauman's Chinese Theater doorman.
Yeah, he was a doorman at Grauman's, and he was 7 feet 7 inches tall.
I have about 6 different heights for him, but the one I had was 7'4". And you had
Okay.
7'6". I had one that said 8 foot something. I was like, really? I don't think so.
Yeah, I don't think he was 8, but he was 7'7".
Well, I think
He may have been 8 with the costume
with the
on.
boots, yeah, or something. He hosted a children's television show in Los Angeles in the 50s called The Gentle Giant, but he was not strong enough to carry Patricia Neal. Does that sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was not strong enough as Seymour to carry the actress that played Audrey, and we had to
Yep.
do a little bit of trick lighting there.
Yep.
During the early phases of pre-production of the film, Daryl Zanuck suggested Jack Palance for Gort.
Yeah.
What difference
don't
would it
know.
make? He just wouldn't be tall, and he doesn't say anything, so I don't know. And then the only other thing of note about the cast I have is that to increase the sense of reality, several famous broadcast journalists were hired to do cameos as themselves,
Oh, yeah.
including Elmer Davis, who we made fun of last time we did this.
And Drew Pearson. Drew Pearson was he reminded me a lot of War of the Worlds. But it would be the same right now as casting like Wolf Blitzer and Dan Rather or whomever.
Or Anderson Cooper, yeah.
Yeah. And there's literally like 24 of them. And they're uncredited. They're not in the credits anywhere, pre or
Oh,
post.
that's funny.
But he wanted this feeling of international news, and because public perception is kind of what pushes all the plot all the way through. Whether it's everybody at the boarding house talking about the commies and all of that, or listening to the radio and hearing all the reports, or hearing the radio broadcasts by the army guys as they're trying to hunt him down. So there's a lot of this paranoia and suspense that's built up by media around them. So I think that was very smart on Robert Weiss's part.
Mm-hmm. I just think that Elmer Davis guy is hilarious. Every time I hear him, I'm like, is he in Greater Tuna? He sounds
Davis.
Elmer Davis.
Yep.
I don't think you would hear that kind of an accent on today's news broadcasting. But anyway,
I've got some trivia. The suit that Gort is wearing is actually 2 different suits. There's an interior suit and an exterior, and Locke got so hot in it that they could only film for a few minutes, and then they would have to give him like half-hour breathers because it was so hot, and he's in the sun outside, because they did do a lot of this on location too. There's a lot of location work in this. Let's see. You had talked about the resurrection scene. So essentially, Klaatu is gunned down by the army and left in a cell to be picked up later on, probably by people going to Roswell or Area 51. And Patricia Neal delivers the message, and Gort abducts him to bring him back to life for his final message. The MPAA did not like that they had the power of life and death and to resurrect something. So they had to change the dialogue. Robert Weiss changed the dialogue for her to ask about it. Will you live forever now? And he goes, no, that power is reserved to the Almighty. So he literally mentions God as an alien in this to get past the ratings board.
I was going to bring this up. I don't know that much about Edmund North, who did the screenplay. I know he did Patton.
Yep.
He's known for this and Patton. So do you think it was Robert Wise that put all the biblical allegory in this, or do you think it was North?
It was probably North. I don't think it was Wise.
Okay.
He doesn't seem to be that way in any other.
It's no coincidence that the name Klaatu chooses to get into society with is Carpenter.
Mm-hmm.
And he's resurrected like Jesus Christ, who was a carpenter, Or no, I guess it was Joseph was a carpenter. Anyway, there's a lot of biblical allegory in this. And like you said, the public, or not the public, but the studios did not like it. They were scared that it was going to offend
Yeah.
people.
They didn't want to offend people and everything else, and the power to stop all energy on Earth. The message itself, which is kind of blunt and in your face and saying, stop what you're doing or we'll just nuke you.
Yeah,
kind of
and
thing.
all of those elements that they're trying to protect us from or not offend us with are things that I think make this story even stronger. I
They
think
are.
they just deepen it.
And they are universal concepts that mean a lot, and like you've said, still resonate today and still work today. So it's all still important. But yeah, they were worried about the resurrection, and so they had that adjusted. And I'm pretty sure North did that because he's really good with dialogue. The dialogue in this is very reminiscent of The Thing. It reminds me, it's a lot of Whit and Perry, and kind of, it's not too fast. It's really well
It's not
done.
fast like The Thing. I watched that again the other night. It's really fast. This is more well paced, I guess is the best word I can use.
But Patton has really good dialogue as well. So North is really good at character dialogue in general, and it works.
And every
for
character
this.
in this is valid. I don't have a problem with any performance. They're all good. Even Hugh Marlowe gets on your nerves, but he's supposed to.
Yeah, he's supposed to be that concerned boyfriend who's maybe a little greedy, maybe a little bit, but also buys into the whole Red Scare that the commies are coming and we got to fight them.
Right. And she leaves him.
But even Bobby is good in this. As a child actor, he's not that kind of complaining, annoying child actor. He's really good at it.
No, I love what Klaatu says. Remind me to tell you in the morning about a train that runs without tracks. And then he shuts the door and Bobby goes over and picks up the train and looks at the tracks like, what the fuck? How?
Yeah, and then has a little shrug of, that guy's crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
Yeah, it's funny.
And just the way he off the cuff says stuff like, "Oh yeah, Mr. Carpenter has lots of those in his room. Are those diamonds? Yeah."
Diamonds. He gave me 2 of them for a couple of bucks.
For a
I'm like,
couple of
that's
bucks.
funny. He just needed money for something and he didn't really care about whatever the value is, or he didn't know the value of diamonds. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
because
funny.
again, it goes to that kind of Star Trek symposium of money no longer is important. We don't
Right.
need that if we're all valuing resources. Well, before we do keys,
I may have.
do-
Let me see if I got anything. I thought I had a trivia. I do. Well, it's kind of a key, but it's not really. It's the footage from this movie was used in To Serve Man, the Twilight Zone episode
Zone.
written by Richard Matheson. I think it's the landing sequence. Not
I'm
really
sure
a
it was.
key, but just a little bit trivia there.
And that was another thing I really liked about this as a kid, first watching it, was the fact that the ramp and everything, the way it came out of nowhere. And then when it recedes and disappears, it recedes into nowhere. And there is a making of you can find, and they talk a little bit about that, about how they sealed it with tape in such a way that you couldn't see the seam. And then the way it opened, it tore the tape away and came out. And then they just did that in reverse, of course, for the reverse shot, which is
Yeah, it looks really cool. It's like a seamless saucer, whereas most saucers back then weren't seamless. You saw the bolts and rivets or whatever.
right.
Yeah,
And it's kind of a cool segue to this, because the other thing that works in this movie is the way Weiss grounds it in practicality. You feel like Gort is an actual thing. He's not a special effect. You just feel like the ship is real and solid. Even when Gort is encased in the huge plastic thing that they put him in this polymer
like
to kind of,
lucite. Yeah,
to kind of make him non-mobile, but he just ends up melting it all. But everything feels real and grounded. The remake should be taught in classes as the way to not understand anything about the original film to do a remake of it. I am so serious. I didn't want to watch it because I'm not a Keanu fan. Everybody knows that. But I did. But it is so bad. And actually, I'm not sure what your Tomatoes listed as,
Oh,
but
I'm sure it's not good.
it is a terrible movie. Gort is only in CGI. Most of the effects are CGI.
Well, they're trying to
It,
make it a blockbuster. It's probably got a lot of action and stuff too, doesn't it?
yeah, it has a lot of action that makes no sense, that doesn't work and doesn't mean anything. They hook Klaatu up to a lie detector to see if he's really an alien or not, even though he just came out of a spaceship, which isn't a spaceship, it's just a big glowing ball of light. He's not here to give an atomic message. He's here to say you don't take care of your planet. And it's an ecological message.
To give you an idea of the way they rank things, Rotten Tomatoes gave the one we're covering today 95%. They gave the one that you're talking about right now 21%.
Yeah. And that's generous, I think.
I'm not surprised. I would think it's going to be like Spielberg's War of the Worlds. Just, oh yeah, let's just throw a lot of action in there or whatever.
But War of
I
the
don't know.
Worlds is better than this just because of the cast, the direction, certain things about it. And they're still trying to tell the original story in that, which is the alien invasion. They just go about it weird because it's like, oh, we planted these
We
ships
planted them
underground.
like seeds in the earth.
Yeah.
That's just crazy.
But yeah, it sucked so bad. There was no theme, there was no message. It was terribly shot. It was terribly acted. To show you, okay, Dr. Bernard Barnart, who's a kind of big supporting character in the
He's
original,
a scientist. Yeah.
right? He's the one that actually forms the conclave of all these scientists to get together.
He's like his
And
own
you,
little UN. Yeah.
and you can tell he's very fascinated with Klaatu. I love that scene where they're meeting in his desk and he's talking to him. He goes, well, you'd have to do something to show them. He goes, well, what would that be? He goes, well, obviously something violent. No, it's got to be something. And when he says, would tomorrow be appropriate around noon? Well, sure, of course. And then later on, when it happens, it cuts to him and he's sitting there just looking out his window. And the secretary comes in going, even the phones don't work, doctor. Da, da, da. He's going, fascinating. This is, you know.
Yeah, it's great.
But to
I think
show
it
you
speaks
how,
volumes that we just mentioned this movie and War of the Worlds, and the 50s versions are better than the modern versions. They
yes,
are. I mean,
yes.
because War of the Worlds is one of my favorite science fiction films too. It's probably in the top 5.
Yeah, George Powell, yes.
Yeah.
But the lack of understanding. So the Barnhart character in the remake with Keanu is played by John Cleese.
That's not good. I
And
love John
why?
Cleese, but he's too funny.
Yeah, why would he be in this?
He's too silly.
Doesn't work. No. So I say all of that to say that there are times again when you shouldn't do a reboot, you shouldn't do a remake, you shouldn't redo it again, just because it's been done the way it should be done originally. That's my take on the remake of it.
Okay. Well, are we on to keys yet? I think
Yeah.
my trivia really was kind of a key anyway.
Well, and we've mentioned several already, you know, of course. But definitely, I would think the first key that hits me is Forbidden Planet because of the music. Bernard Herrmann did this, and Gil Malay did. The husband and wife team did Forbidden Planet, but they sound similar. They have that otherworldly kind of dulce,
The theremin thing, the theremin effect.
kind of sound.
Yeah. If you're going to go music first, obviously the theremin is a direct key to Forbidden Planet, but I would go to Danny Elfman, who says that he was inspired by this, and that's what made him want to be a composer.
Yep.
And you listen to the soundtrack, and I'll go ahead and put this as a key to Mars Attacks, and it sounds like this. And then I have another little key that I mentioned the first time we did this film, and that is Led Zeppelin, because Jimmy Page used to use a theremin on stage. And when he did his way too long guitar solo for Dazed and Confused, he would take a violin bow to the guitar, but then he would use his hands with a theremin and make all these crazy sounds that you heard in either Whole Lotta Love or Dazed and Confused.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, he was a guitarist ahead of his time. I used to like to do really crazy things like that. So,
Mm-hmm.
but anyone that uses a theremin, you just don't hear of that instrument that often.
This movie influenced so many other late 50s movies too. It came out in 51, but like Earth versus the Flying Saucer was a big one where they did the same kind of thing of ships flying over modern landmarks and just being flying saucers that crash into things and all of that. So there was a big intent of a glut, so to speak, of UFO movies in the 50s. So
Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I'm trying to just put some down so that I have them for reference. I have Rocky Horror immediately. I always going back to music again, but this for a different reason. The theme song, science fiction double feature.
yeah,
Michael Rennie was
Michael
ill the day
Rennie.
the Earth stood still.
I've got several that are just Daryl Zanuck has said this is one of his favorite movies of all time, and it really influenced him. And he was the head of 20th Century Fox, so that kind of helped. And without him, we wouldn't have had a Jaws. So that kind of goes with him.
Didn't he do Close Encounters too?
He produced
Okay,
it. Yep.
well, makes sense.
It's a bit of a trivia thing and kind of an Easter egg, but Tom, when he's in his office, the door behind him says Richard Carlson. That is
Yes,
from
it's a
Creature from the
joke.
Black Lagoon. Yeah.
Right. It's the guy that we confuse him with.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Yep.
hilarious. I think it was an in joke by somebody.
It had to be.
Yeah,
There's no way that that was not. Um, there's also I've got Independence Day
which is
because
another
not
one of those
only
blockbuster type sci-fi movies.
and there's also a scene in it where they're watching television and they're watching The Day There Stood Still.
Right.
But it's about an alien coming to Earth. It's just that they attack rather than infiltrate and try to find out.
Right. I have Army of Darkness because Ash uses the line Klaatu Barada
Oh yeah,
Nikto in
yeah.
it. You were talking about how that turns up in things, and that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head, but it's turned up in numerous other things as well.
Galaxy Quest calls
Yeah.
it the Klaatu Nebula, which is where they find the Thermians, and they're Thermians, not
The
Thermians.
Thermians.
Yeah.
That's so
Um,
funny.
I've got Lost in Space, Star Trek, and Forbidden Planet, where to the advanced technology you're using, you don't even touch. You wave your hands over things and lights come on and you touch them that way. That happened in several episodes of Star Trek. That happened in several episodes of Lost in Space. It happened in Forbidden Planet. And that's how
It's
Klaatu manipulates his
it's so
control.
funny that you said that because I have a totally different one for the same reason, and it's Superman. They all
Yep.
look like crystals, like he used, like Jor-El used on Krypton, or when he has the Fortress of Solitude. I'm like, we couldn't. They're black and white, so we don't know that they're colored or anything, but they look like white crystals. It's funny.
I also think you can do key references from Metropolis, which is the robot, is a huge part of the story, but not the only part of the story, to Gort, to like even C3PO. That kind of very metallic, very stiff robot. I think you can see a corollary and inspiration there.
Yeah, I was thinking, should I put Star Wars down? But you wouldn't know unless you're thinking of C-3PO because the stories aren't really similar at all.
Right.
Yeah. I've got Jesus Christ
Oh,
because
there you go. Of
there's the
course.
Christ allegory. You know what? It might be, I don't know, maybe the Bible. I don't know. I'm just gonna put Jesus. I don't know.
Well, resurrection and problem with resurrection, and his name is Carpenter. So yeah,
Right.
you've got influences there.
Yeah.
I've got this movie essentially changed the perception of the public after they watched the movie of aliens that had been around since War of the Worlds. War of the Worlds had created this, oh, they're coming for our
And
women
they're
or our water
savage.
or destroying and they're savage and they're awful and they're
Right.
da da da. This had much more of a, no, we're altruistic. We actually care about you. That's the only reason we're here. Now that faded really quickly because it's a lot easier to do Mars attacks than it is to do Day the Earth Stood Still, right?
Well, no, but it came back with Star Trek, and Star Trek did it too.
Well, and that's my next one. The whole underlying mythology and theme of this is in Star Trek a lot, even
Yeah.
down to that violation of the Prime Directive, where essentially Kirk and company are saying, look, you're not doing this right. I'm going to destroy all your computers because you're not even fighting a war anymore. You look at a spreadsheet and go into a disintegration chamber. So I'm going to destroy all that. So you have to really fight, teach you how to do it. It's that superiority complex almost of we want to help you be your best self
Well,
kind
it's
of thing.
ignoring the Prime Directive is what it is.
Totally.
That's so funny because we talk about how many times he does not pay attention to the Prime Directive. But I would go even more to say that like the Federation of Planets is
Oh
a
gosh, yeah.
global or interplanetary not delegation. What's the word?
Organization. Yeah.
Yeah, it's about something bigger than you or your country. It's your world, and you are a part
Yes.
of an even bigger thing. And the Federation of Planets works as a good term for that because it's an alliance of planets.
I think there's also a direct corollary of this superior force landing and scaring us all and being unknown to us that's in like Childhood's End, which is an Arthur C. Clarke novel, which was turned into, I think, a couple of different movies and series. Independence Day, I already mentioned. V is another one. And one of the ones that we covered on the podcast, Arrival, where this unknown alien ship comes down and we don't know what it's doing, what it wants, why it's here.
And it's all about that movie's more about understanding them and what's going
Correct.
on. But yeah,
More of an altruistic
communication.
approach, less of a warfare approach. Yeah.
The only other one I have, I think, it actually goes back to music again, and I just didn't mention it when we did music, is that the cover, and we did this last time, the cover of Ringo Starr's album, Goodnight Vienna, features Ringo and Gort coming out of the flying saucer instead of
Yeah,
Gort
oh
and
yeah.
Klaatu. It's just, it's an iconic album cover. So you would recognize the picture if you saw it.
Well, I think that it's something to be said that the poster for this is so antithetical to what the movie is.
Right.
Because the poster is Gort, and he's holding like some blonde woman and
Yeah, I've got it
shooting a
behind
laser
me.
beam. Yeah, shooting a laser beam out of his eye and everything. And that's not the movie at all.
No, but it's the same thing with Forbidden Planet. And we said that. They have Robbie the Robot doing the same thing, where it's like they're this villain carrying the woman or whatever. And Robbie's not a villain at all. And Gort's not really a villain. He's a security guard, basically.
Well, he's a policeman.
Right.
And I think Klaatu even says that we created these robots as
To defend us.
intergalactic policemen, and they immediately, when they see aggression, they immediately take action against the aggressor. That's the way he phrases it. And it's kind of like, if that's your justice system, that could be scary because
Yeah.
you got to control your temper.
And since I've got the poster up behind me, look at the thing in the background. It looks like a hand holding a planet,
Yeah.
like domination.
Well, look at the phrase is a warning and an ultimatum.
Right.
You know,
But
so-
that is true. He does do that.
Well, he does do that, but it's
Yeah.
not through an iron grip of the planet.
It's not through warfare. No, exactly.
Right. I could talk for hours and hours about this movie. I just love this movie. I love everything about it. I think it is a comfort food for me, and it is my favorite science fiction film of all time.
Well, and I think like Night of the Living Dead, which I compared it to, and as far as one of my favorite movies, is it's because it's so influential. It's like that's why it's so important to us. It's because of it. So many other things exist.
Yep.
You know.
Totally.
Yeah. Are you going to go color again?
I'm on color. We're ready to go.
Well, you'll get to see this picture in color because it is in color, and he's blue.
He is kind of a bluey teal kind of
A teal
look.
tint. But did you have anything else that you wanted
Nope.
to say?
That was it.
Other
Please
than
watch
this
this
movie's
movie over
very
and over
important.
again. It
And
is.
we felt that we needed to do a redux. We have not done this on video, and that's why we're doing this for you folks out there. And you just
Yes.
made me think we have not done Arrival on video either, but we did Arrival back in the day as well. So that may be
Oh, okay.
around the corner. You never know.
Maybe.
We'd like to thank you folks for joining us today. We hope you liked our little science fiction redux of this very classic film, The Day the Earth Stood Still. If you like what you heard, we have other shows out there on YouTube, shorter shows. We also have Patreon. If you really like us and want to help support us, we could always use additional monies to help back, or not, what's the word I'm looking for?
Support the show.
Supplement the cost that it is to do this show. But if you go over to Patreon and just want to get a taste, there's a lot of free stuff over there too, folks, as far as some shows of before we had video where David and I are just talking about our backgrounds and how long we've known each other and why we have this history together. And you might find that as interesting as well. Also, David has mentioned in the past, if you go to our website, YouTube is a little confusing. I've got the podcast shows and other shows categorized in groups, but it's still kind of hard to go back and find things unless you do a really good search. If you go to our website, you can see each season by numbered episode and see what films we have covered there. And if you're wanting to see what's coming up in the future, aside from little promos that I put on YouTube on Thursdays, you can sign up for our newsletter. It goes out weekly, and it is not spam. It is just basically saying, this is the movie we're going to be talking about on Monday. So that way you get at least 3 or 4 days in advance. I think they go out on Friday. So you get at least 3 days advance notice to watch the film before you listen to the podcast, if you listen to it on Monday. Of course,
That's awesome.
It's evergreen. It's out there forever. If you want to, you can listen to it whenever you want to, or watch us whenever you want to. Anyway, I will shut up now. Thanks as always, David. I enjoyed this, and I'll be seeing you next week when I think we're in Horrorland and we're going very modern, like a few years ago.
Oh, wow. A new one.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right. I'll see you then.
bye.
Bye.
Can't start the car. Johnny has the key.